My life is like, it's impaired because I can't get the medication as easily as I need to. And, there's a lot of other people that experience different challenges.
It's easy for me to put pressure on her to do things and be frustrated with her maybe not being focused on it. Me being as a focused person, there's a lot I could do to help the situation.
I spoke with someone, they're like, well, clearly you're going to be an art major. And I wanted to be, but it didn't seem socially acceptable.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the ADHD Eavesdrop, where you can be a butterfly on the wall and listen in on my conversations. And who am I? I'm Janine and Jess. I'm an ADHD life coach who loves to help people maneuver their ADHD, come up with strategies that help make their lives better, and just basically live the best life that they can have. So just remember, coaching is always an option. And if you're looking to get a hold of me, my contact information is in the details down below. I'd love to hear from you. But in the meantime, we have a great guest here for you today. This is Jess Templin. And Jess is a family friend who has ADHD. And I'm going to have her tell you a little bit about herself first. But you do need to know there's a family connection. She is friends with my son, and her significant other is my grandson's godfather. And his name is Storm, and Storm may be joining us later on. So if he pops in, you'll know what's happening. So, Jess, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, thank you so much as well for having me. I'm Jess. I am a Michigan native, been here my whole life. So if you hear that coming through in the accent, it's very real. I was a later diagnosis in life. And if you hear my cat, I do have one. So sorry
It's
about
all
that in advance.
right. A lot of people understand the animal noises. We have those a lot.
Perfect. Yeah, so Michigan native. I didn't have a diagnosis until later in life, which surprise or not surprise, being female as well, that tends to be a usual thing, unfortunately. So there's a lot of my life lived just naturally, and I have a lot of experience there, and then also aware of my differenceness. So
Awesome. So, Jess, why don't you tell us? You said you were later diagnosed. I myself was 50 when I got diagnosed. I had been diagnosed with anxiety, depression, OCD, all those things before I finally got my ADHD. How old were you?
So wow, that's a good question. I don't remember the exact age. Let me think back on that. I believe that I was about 19 when I finally got my diagnosis. So that did come in college. And college was actually a big reason as to why that happened. I was just honestly, I had been very studious for a lot of my life. It did take me a little bit earlier in life to get that kind of thing going, a little kick in my tush in the fifth grade, to get my poop in a group. And I had it going really well. And I was excelling at school. I didn't struggle in many subjects. And I went on to college, which was really encouraged. Everyone said, "You're so smart and you have all this going for you. So what are you going to do with it?" And I never really figured that one out at that time. And I started just going into college. It's like, that's the next thing that we do now. So thinking I'll figure it out then. And then I was in my first, actually rather second semester full time, and I was struggling in subjects that I actually was normally really naturally good at. So it was an extremely frustrating experience for me, very challenging in a lot of ways. And how that came about was I had a meeting with my professors, as one does. You check in with them, and you review everything that you are working on and how you are performing in the class itself, which was not something I ever enjoyed doing. I don't love sitting down one-on-one to get those critiques, but they were necessary. And
Are you kidding? I think those are like exciting and fun to be around, aren't they? Like the highlight of your day.
right, so normal. So it was a hard conversation to have, and also trying to be professional and not emotional about it. But It was English. Just I'd never struggled in that department at all. I'd always excelled, no problem. So it was a very different world for me. And after talking to that professor, she actually encouraged me to go get checked out because of the things that I was describing to her. As far as what I was struggling with, it was things that I just hadn't struggled with before. Keeping my attention the same way, being able to focus on the assignments. And I let her know that that was more than just in her subject alone, which is why I think she really did encourage me to go speak to a doctor. So I went down the process and I actually quite quickly got a diagnosis on that, which was exciting, but so emotional as well after going through my childhood not being diagnosed and having all of the challenges that do often come with that and not knowing that those were what I was experiencing. It was an extremely validating experience, but also helped me feel like I had footing as to how to proceed forward in a way that would actually work for me. Which has been interesting since that time because it hasn't been as straightforward as I thought it might be at that point.
So do you know how often I hear that story of hitting college and all of a sudden all your strategies, all your coping mechanisms, all that stuff just goes out the window and you're floundering and you don't know what's happening. And
Mhm.
because the supports that are there in high school, whether they're defined as supports or whatever, suddenly are not there anymore. And it's really hard to get a footing. And I don't know what the percentage is. It's a really high percent of students with ADHD drop out within their first year or two because of the fact that they just can't handle it. The other
Mhm.
thing, and I don't know if I've ever mentioned this to you before, but our brains do develop slower. And
Oh,
so,
really?
yes, absolutely. Our brains are, so it is a developmental delay in our
Mhm.
brain development. And
Mhm.
so, on average, they say anywhere between 3 and 5 years behind in executive functioning skills than our peers. So, our college kids' brains are still developing because our brains are still developing until we're like, 25 to 30 in a normal
Mhm.
case, right? If you're not neurodivergent. Neurodivergent brains, that last final push to development can take up until like 35 or 40 for us.
I
So
definitely feel that experience. That connects more dots now as well.
yeah. And so like when we hit college and everybody else, all the neurotypical people are developmentally 18-year-olds, developmentally, we're still 15-year-olds when it comes to our executive function.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. It's too real. And even years after college now, I'm almost 29, so we're nearing the 30 mark. And that I didn't have a clear vision as to what it would look like now. Not that many of us do. But there's a big thing about goal setting, I think, in life that I think I also have struggled with in that regard because my goals have also, if I do figure out goals, they look a lot different than peers throughout time. And that's something I've noticed too.
Oh,
And
so
yeah.
how
So just, I think that if you want to get into some more like standard, like typical things, I think I feel more peers settling down now and looking at that stability factor, like, okay, they made it through, especially because I did attend college and I did finish that. What the next steps after that look like. I would say that that honestly has been the hardest transition I've gone through is getting done with college. Now that I was able to get my footing in college, and then that was gone, and now I'm just free, which is wonderful, but also just wow. Like there's a lot to figure out and there's a lot to decide for myself and structure for myself. I don't have school or an education or that kind of system to work my life around. And I came from a family where working hard is very important, and that ethic was brought up in us. But education was super important as well. So my parents made sure that I had the mindset going into college that that's what I was doing, no matter what side job I might have had during college. Those didn't matter as much because I'm working on my education right now. So then you strip that back. You've completed that. Now what? And a lot of people encouraged me to go on in my education, but at the time of graduation for me, for my bachelor's degree, I was pretty burnt out. I needed time to recover. I couldn't just jump in to the next thing. And at that time, I also had realized that I still wasn't determined in what I wanted to do going forward. So there was no way I was going to get all this gumption to do that again, not having that drive behind it. So, kind of, I think getting out of that whole, I have these courses, I have this work to do, that also was extremely fulfilling. Speaking of ADHD and symptoms, it's that I don't think that we often get to celebrate our accomplishments nearly as much. Like, I think they might be observed, but maybe not as celebrated or as much. Like, it's more of that I just got this task done. Like, okay, but I do enjoy that. I get my excitement out of getting those tasks done. And in school, getting to go through that, I use those tasks as like little rewards for myself. Okay, I got to check this box, and I had all these boxes I was checking on a regular basis and throughout a normal week. And now it looks a lot different. Working
So
for
people
Mhm.
with ADHD often like really are resistant to having a schedule and a routine and that type of thing because we like to be impulsive or whatever, but we need it so badly, so
Yeah.
badly. Without it, we just kind of like are floating through life.
Mhm. And it
So when
feels
I
like
retired, I was like, I'm not living by a calendar. I'm not living by a calendar. Guess what I have to do?
Mhm. Yeah, and it feels boring or whatever, but it's also, I think, providing that structure for yourself also allows the excitement of breaking away from it and the spontaneity that we do also crave. How can you be spontaneous when you're constantly just everywhere anyway? That's not very spontaneous. That could be
I
considered
love
impulsive,
that.
So,
If you are immersed in spontaneity, what is spontaneity, right?
yeah. Yes,
It's
yeah.
normal.
So the structure is important, and I think creating for that for yourself sometimes can be the hardest thing. But I've also noticed in being in a relationship, so to bring my partner into this, even though he's not here at this time, it's looked different because I've had plenty of time in my life where I was on my own, a single person, as an adult and diagnosed, where I needed to structure my own time and make my own routines and schedules. And I've done that. And you are making all your choices and you're the one that's holding you accountable. But when you have someone else that's right there with you, you have their whole factor of a world into that. And they need a lot more, especially if they're neurotypical. They need more of that neurotypical normalcy going on. But they also, my partner at least, is really interested in, living life with me. So it's not just about that structure. It's like what does work for both of us. And I think a lot of that still takes me figuring out and us working on constantly. I'd say that to have like a healthy relationship, we are talking all the time, talking about things all the time, and trying to understand each other constantly because we think that we get it or we assume. And that is something that I've noticed I have to really work on in my relationships is making sure that I do have the external communication as well. Because I'm really good at thinking about it and thinking, oh, I've talked about this, or oh, I've said this, or having these conversations in my mind because I'm very busy up there thinking about all the things I need to take care of. And it needs to translate outward to the exterior world as well. So that's an
You
interesting,
are very selfish with all of your pretty thoughts, aren't you?
yes, or by, yes, and not sharing them adequately enough. So,
Once you got diagnosed and you
mhm.
looked back, because we all do, we get that
Yeah.
diagnosis and we go, oh shit. And we look back and we're like, I see all the things. I see all the things. Did you also have anybody who said, well, of course you are, and get mad because you're like, why didn't you tell me I had ADHD? Because I didn't know.
That's really funny. It's a good point. I try to think about that. And I don't know that I had anyone that like, it was more like my siblings specifically when I was like, oh, like this and this totally makes sense now. Cause I have an older sister and a younger brother. And my sister and I are really close in age. My brother and I are close enough, relative. So we're all pretty tight, but they were the ones that I think were the most like, well, yeah. Like, and I'm just like, but I think also in that they're not as exposed. So I think that's to say too that at my age and in my point in time, ADHD, ADD also is becoming more talked about. Like when we were younger, that was not nothing at all. Like
Not
maybe
for
little boys.
girls, for sure.
It was not like a female thing or anything like that. And
How did your ADHD show up for you when you were a kid?
so really, I think it's like I did have hyperactivity. I was pretty wired, but I also required things like I was constantly in sports because that's what worked for me. Specifically, I played soccer and I got to the point where I was playing on 3 teams at once, like one season, 3 teams. Like I would play indoor and outdoor year round. And I was a better person, I like to think, and people seem to get along with me better. I was more palatable, rather when I was kept busy and exercised and had all this structure to my life that really helped take care of that energy for me. I was also very creative and into art, constantly doing watercolors or other kind of doodles. So doodling all of the time in class. And I would get in trouble a lot in school for being distracted, actually. Surprise, surprise. Often daydreaming out the window. I'm still to this day the biggest daydreamer. But that's how I made it through school was doodling and staring out the window and taking art classes and staying physically active. But I still would get in trouble with like not paying attention enough. And how I learned to like work on that and like pass, was I would structure myself to pay attention diligently enough for notes. And I would hyper focus on note taking and I would let my brain wander in different ways and I would make doodles, but I would doodle about things that made sense with my notes to really just help me go through everything that was happening in class. But whenever I did that, I never had to study, which was like, that's how I think about it like a superpower because I saw my sister try so hard through school. She had a very different experience than me, and we were like nearly a grade apart. And he always was doing the note cards after school and doing all this extra studying. And I was just trying to do as little as possible. Like I was just doing the homework and getting that in so I didn't get, in trouble.
You are the first person who's ever told me that you took notes well because you hyper focused on them, but I did. Like I
Mm-hmm.
didn't really pay attention, but I found the process of writing notes and doing the outline and trying to make everything fit where it was supposed to. That part was interesting enough in my brain that I would hyper focus on taking good notes just because I liked the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's socially acceptable. You're paying attention in that way. You're engaging with the material. So that
And
was
using colored pens and
yeah,
colored
the gel pens for everything, highlighters, anything. I love and it was never like as good as like the most studious girls or guys, but normally girls in the class or in the grade. But it was up there. People knew me for taking notes, and that got really serious in college because I'm so thankful I was doing that in school to get by in my younger grades, K through 12. But then when I got to college, it's what got me through. It's why I was actually able to graduate and do everything I did because I did a double major as well, which is like kind of that like, oh, you made it and you hyper focused in it. Great. Like,
So what did you major in?
biology and environmental science.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not, light subjects either, of course, because if you're going to do
No.
it right.
Yeah, and I definitely didn't start there. I went in not knowing what I was going to do. I spoke with someone. They're like, "Well, clearly you're going to be an art major," and I wanted to be, but it didn't seem socially acceptable, and so I couldn't pick that. And that was for other reasons too, and family pressures or what have you there. But so I switched over to sciences because I was like, "Well, I'm pretty good at this, and it makes sense, so why not?" You know. But
the connection with ADHD and art is very strong.
Mm-hmm.
Like almost everybody with ADHD has an artistic outlet that they have associated with them. And art seems to be something that people with ADHD are really drawn to. I myself just started a online store for my artwork. So, it's like I love to draw. And
Mm-hmm.
it's very common for people with ADHD to have that love. And I don't know exactly what the connection is. I've talked ad nauseum with people about it. Because there's, you can't look at it and say biologically people with ADHD are prone to be artistic. But they
Mm-hmm.
do say that we are prone to creativity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that if I had to just off the top of my hat, I really truly think it has to do with expression, the ways that we can actually express ourselves, because there's a lot of ways that we're kind of repressed in life, or told this isn't, you shouldn't really do that, or that's not polite, or it just doesn't. We don't always fit into the societal norms, and so it's one way that we are free to be ourselves, and it does it does take a lot of energy to create, and you have all this freedom there. So to me, it makes perfect sense, because how else do these people, maybe it's not always art, maybe it's different forms of art for people. Like some people are into more mechanical things and working with their hands or tinkering, that kind of creativity. But
And I'm fascinated with the subject. I've talked a lot about it previously, but when you said, I should have been an art major, I'm like, so should I.
yeah. But does it pay the bills? And that's what, constantly I was told. And now that I'm out, I'm always thankful for my experience. And I try to live life not regretting anything, because I'm here where I am with the perspectives I have because of what I've been through.
So what are you doing now as a living?
I don't do
I
anything
do.
as direct with biology and environmental science, but I work for a musical instrument company, Northfield, and we make primarily mandolins and mandolin family instruments. I'm specifically the sales and marketing side of that.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
what role do you think your ADHD played in that whole thing?
Oh, a lot of roles there. So I actually learned about the company specifically through just like working with friends and doing odd jobs in college was kind of like my like socialness of that. I met people. I ended up going over to this building to help a friend with some work that they were behind on. And, I was just like, oh, I can paint a wall. That's I'm like, yeah, happy to help. I need some cash. So I got familiar with this place through just doing a couple odd jobs for them. And then I started to see like what they were doing. And I got to be in the buildings where like the action was happening. And I'm like, well, this place is magical. There's all this creativity. Oh my goodness. Music, the mandolin is beautiful. Like I was just captivated by all of the moving parts.
Dopamine, dopamine, dopamine.
Seriously, I was like, this place is awesome. And these people are so cool and chill and just like, I've always been interested in music too, but I never thought that I would be like making music or I never would have thought that I'd be in the position I am today. But I always had a deep love and appreciation for music. It's really helped me emotionally with my emotional regulation and being able to like kind of curate my own mood, because it does really impact me in that way. So I've always had a deep appreciation for the music, for music and the arts in general. And I found people that really resonated with that. So my boss is just like this whole company that he made is a passion project, and it's his whole baby company. He has like, 12 other jobs, like businesses and things like that he's doing. And this is the fun one. And so I feel blessed to be able to be a part of the fun one. But that's also hard in itself sometimes, because it's also not as structured. Like I've created my job where I'm at. There was someone working kind of like sales marketing, but not really. It was a very small company. So it was just kind of like the perfect storm came together and I made it here. And it definitely was way more appealing to me than working in any lab. And I had all that experience with the biology and the environmental science. And I was like, this is cool, but I don't want to look at slides under a microscope or do the test tube stuff or the chemistry that just wasn't me. So I just tried to find something that did fit, and I happened to just be in the right place at the right time and took a chance, and they took a chance on me, and that's how I'm here 4 or 5 years later.
Nice. Well, and the fact that you've been able to develop your own job, I've done
Mhm.
that before, and it's just the process of developing the job is fun and exciting, right? It's like that just
Yeah.
adds a whole different spectrum to the whole thing. So
Mhm.
that's very cool. So I was hoping that Storm was going to make it, but I don't think he's going to. I did want to touch on the topic though of what it's like living with a neurotypical guy when you have ADHD, because I live in a family that's entirely made up of ADHD people, and I've never had to do that. Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I feel like from my perspective, he really keeps things more on the tracks. Is the best way to put it because and we have this kind of story or joke, but it's also rooted in reality where, I'm gonna go do something, whether that be, oh, I'm gonna go hang this photo. Okay, I'm gonna hang a photo on a wall. There's a lot of tasks. Like that sounds like one task. It's not. there
No.
are you have to find the hammer. You have to have the painting. You have to have the nail. You have to figure out where it can go in the wall. That might
The
take
stud
another
finder.
tool.
Gotta have a stud
Yeah,
finder.
exactly.
If
There's
if you have the patience to worry about the stud finder, right?
that too. That too. Which is like I only thought about the stud finder now because I'm with him, by the way. Because if I were prior to my relationship with him, I would just be finding the hammer, the nail, and the photos on the wall. And then I'll tweak it later. But so, I think it's like more there's a lot more structure and keeping me on the train tracks because not only did I just explain finding tools as different tasks, which they very much are, but I also would get distracted in the next room and be like, oh, I need to put this away, or I'm thirsty, and then forget that I'm thirsty, and then have to go to the bathroom. And then I come back and I'm like, I don't even remember what I was doing. But then I see the vacuum. I'm like, oh, I need a vacuum right there. I'm gonna need the vacuum for when I do the painting. Right. Okay. Trying to stay on track. And then just constant distraction. So I would say that he keeps me on in the train tracks and a little more organized than I would be on my own. And I do have to say he's outside the door. So if you want to hold on for just another moment, you might be able to ask him himself. But
Yay, cool.
hi, welcome. Welcome home.
Thank you.
We're still doing this, but we're wrapping up if you don't mind jumping in for a moment.
Okay.
Cool.
We'll just chat.
Yeah, that's easy to do. So, I think like the biggest part is just keeping me in the tracks and then also figuring out like that whole balance of making structure, but also he's not all about that. Like, that's not, he's an extremely logical person. Um, so sometimes I feel like we're both sides of the brain. Like, he's the other side and he's all logic, and I'm just creative and just trying to explode over here. Um, not to say he's also not creative, but in that too is like, okay, so we have to share some of that creative side and like the ebb and flow in it. And so I think we find a lot of ebb and flow in our relationship.
Well,
Mhm.
great news. Storm has actually made it home from work. Congratulations. And he is here and joining us. And it happens to be very ironically at the time that we're talking about what it's like for a neurodivergent person to be coupled with a neurotypical person. And Storm is a neurotypical person. I wouldn't say normal, but he's neurotypical. So, so welcome, Storm. How are you doing today?
Doing really good. Was obviously a big day at work, but I think most days are when they're good days. Just yeah, kind of checking the boxes. So just kind of another day. Typically lately, I guess the general vibe has been good because I finally feel like I'm getting onto a lot of projects that have just been kind of sitting around the house for a long time. So I'm like more
Always feels good
excited
to
to
get
get
something
home
done.
from work. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
You're more excited to get home from work because you were already excited to get home to Jess, right? So,
yeah.
so
Exactly.
Jess and I were just talking about the fact that you keep her on the rails when she has all kinds of side quests that she would like to go
Yeah.
on.
Perfect. That is exactly how I describe it.
Yeah.
So what is it like for you trying to maintain the rails while she's side questing?
So a lot of it is it's a balance of knowing, like, immediately I can see what needs to be done, as in like for the project itself. So that is never really the issue. It's more I do need to I really have to like check myself to navigate the situation. So like if I know what needs to be done and I know Jess is in just focused on something else, but she would rather be working on this, I can't just like go up to her and tell her, hey, you need to do this or you need to come do, because that's not gonna work. And
Let me talk to you about that. There's something that's called demand avoidance, and we
um,
have it in spades. So if we were planning on doing something and you tell us to do it, you better not count on it being done for probably another 2 weeks because we
yeah.
won't do it if you tell us to.
So it feels like that. It feels like it's like she knows that that's what I was trying to tell her, but then there's like, yeah, so like it's so on my end, it's often trying to navigate how do I kind of coax the situation back to what we're trying to do. So if it's like a broader term thing, like the painting in this room, instead of handing her tools and keep telling her like, hey, now would be a good time to paint and stuff like that, which I definitely did. You know, it's not like I always know how to handle every situation perfectly. I started to really think about, okay, like what are things that I could do that aren't held up by her painting that would also inspire her to paint. So I started to focus on cleaning this room. That was like the most recent thing this weekend. Just making it easier to be in here and work. I did a couple of weeks before that. I started focusing on like prep work and all the. So this is kind of where I'm at, like where I got to check myself, because like as much as it's easy for me to put pressure on her to do things and say and be frustrated with her maybe not being focused on it, me being as a focused person, there's a lot I could do to help the situation. So it's kind of like instead of getting mad, I could put that energy into like something here. And usually what she's doing that's not focused on my or like what we really talked about, because a lot of it is like we discuss something and then the plan just changes. And I feel like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I feel if I can make sure I'm doing really well and she's doing something that is also just needs to be done. Like if we talked about painting and she's just cleaning the kitchen, it is 9 times out of 10 better for me to just let her keep cleaning the kitchen and then not bring up that we talked about painting, and to then shift myself into maybe doing something that would help her get to painting. So like I could like so like one time that's coming to mind right now, instead of getting instead of just talking about it with you and like grilling into it, I just went and sorted all the painting tools, because it was like, because I already know that when we get to painting, that's going to be another reason or another interruption later. So just like a pile of examples that kind of explain what I'm trying to say. So
Well, and like Jess was saying, like what you're talking about, sorting the tools for doing the painting is another task all of its own. It's not part of painting because
yeah,
painting has like many tasks involved.
exactly.
And so we see this huge list of things that we have to do. Either that or we look at it and we say, we got to paint this wall and there's too many things to do. I can't do it. And so because we look at a task and we're like, I can't do that. And then we have to break it down into smaller tasks to make it work for us. Otherwise, it just seems overwhelming. So Jess, what's holding you back from painting that wall?
A lot of things, but mostly myself. You just like trying to keep up with like the general like daily stuff, but it's the flow state. It's like getting into that flow state. I also want to state, because I don't know that this is like common for everybody, but not to jump around too much, but I'm not
It's
medicated.
an ADHD.
Yeah.
You jump everywhere.
Like this is raw ADHD in adulthood, and I am unmedicated. And I also did have the experience while I was in college of being medicated. So I'm understanding the different challenges that I'm facing in the different states that I exist. And
So
I,
unmedicated right now.
yeah, I've
Yeah.
been for like 5 years or something like that. It's been by choice, but also not by choice. And that's also a fault of ADHD and like coordination and like, I would say the market, but health insurance and going to the doctor and all that stuff is like a lot of tasks to keep together for someone who's already struggling with their
Might I
tasks.
point out that because we take stimulants, they are a controlled substance. And so we have to remember that every 3 months we have to go meet with our psychiatrist. And so a lot of people will be like, so that's a lot of remembering.
Yeah,
Yeah.
coordination
It
there.
was definitely like a big thing when you were.
And not
Yes.
only that, but you have to remember to get your medication filled once a month. You have to remember
Yeah.
to call and get it refilled and do all those things. So it's not easy. Medication is not always easy and it's not always accessible.
Yeah. And it's just, I think it is important to shed light on that because there's a lot of conversation about medicated or unmedicated ADHD and the issues with acquiring the medication for a lot of reasons. And it's like, these are, no, I'm not going to die. I mean, I could, there's like an accident that could happen because of my distractions, but like, it's like one of those things where my life is like it's impaired because I can't get the medication as easily as I need to. And there's a lot of other people that experience different challenges or disorders and things that also, for the same kind of reason, need their medication to help them function. And I just think that's important to touch on. How that ties into this whole thing is that it's part of the flow state. So it's easier to be in the flow state, I think, or get into flow medicated, unmedicated. It's not the same. It's like climbing a whole different mountain. It's like, oh, it's just a hill I'm gonna walk up. No, it's a mountain I have to climb. And it can truly feel like that sometimes. So when my partner can step in and see what's going on and decipher the whole room for its situation and what's going on, and then facilitate ways to help me keep in a flow state so I can actually feel accomplished in something, and do that and accomplish something fully to the end, that's a huge win for both of us, obviously, because
Yeah.
we're trying to build a life here. But as an individual, it means so much more to me because I have that support and in a time when I really need it too.
Well, I
So
love to hear Storm talk about like how he contemplates it and how he can best address it. Because a lot of times if your partner doesn't understand what's going on with you, it makes it very personal to them. Because like Storm, on your part, the fact that rather than thinking to yourself, she really just doesn't care about me, she's not doing what she said she was going to do, and that's a reflection of how she feels about me. You're saying she has something that's disabling and I need to help her with that. And this has nothing to do with me personally. A lot of times, though, it's very hard for people to make that distinction. So kudos to you on that one.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be lying if I said if I never felt that emotion. It is hard to, because I know exactly what you're talking about. So, and that is, um, it is probably the first thing that would come to mind for a lot of people that maybe think that the way that I do, like, wow, we really just spent all this time talking about all this, and now this is what's happening. So, but I use this like I have to like I have to like confront myself, and that's how I guess observe it, and that's how I've come to this conclusion that is how, because I have to realize that like we are different people, we are working under different like subsets and sub processes that we learned growing up, that are just like programmed into us, and we don't have a lot of say in that either. And I mean, like, not just like what we learn from people, as in our parents and stuff, but then we're just like born with a physical set of playing cards, like, hormones and all these different things. And just like that's such a deep conversation. So I can just keep going. But
No, because like I was just about to say to Jess, wait till menopause.
Yeah, right.
No.
Yeah, it's
Girl,
just constantly changing and evolving.
girl.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, exactly. So it's like
And
having,
ADHD changes throughout our lives based on a lot of different things. It may be going well when, you're going through a fairly easy time in your life and da 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 da, and then you might get married. And it's a happy event. It's wonderful. Woo, we got married. And the next thing you know, I can't handle my ADHD. What the hell just happened? Right?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
anytime one of those changes happens, something can shift with your ADHD. And
Mhm.
so it's a constant, it's like shooting at a moving target.
Yeah.
Which is why when I do coaching, I'm always telling people, we're gonna come up with strategies and they're going to work for a while and then they're not going to work anymore. And so what we're really trying to learn is the process of what to do when you hit the roadblock. Being able to say, first of all, this is a roadblock for me. Second of all, I can get around it. I'm not going to run away from it. I'm going to deal with it. And third of all, think creatively and come up with strategies on your own that will work.
yeah.
That's what I teach people in coaching. So yeah, I don't know how I got off on that tangent, but
Well, that hits really close though, because that essentially ties exactly with what I was saying. Because I have to see this, that I have to realize how she's viewing it, and that's part of how I check what. Because I realize, like, oh, she's getting frustrated, not because she's frustrated with me, but she's frustrated with this roadblock, kind of like you said. And my job isn't to tell her what's on the other side of the roadblock. I think she's very aware of that, and even if it doesn't feel like that all the time, and even if it's not what's coming out of her mouth as the problem, she, like, the problem to her isn't I'm trying to do, like, so I just have to help her navigate that
I
roadblock.
I I love the fact that you said I don't need to tell her what's on the other side of the roadblock. Thank you. We know what's over there. We just got to get to it.
Yeah, and
And
yeah,
then she might surprise you one day when you get home and the wall might be painted because all of a sudden some flame lit in her and it happens pretty easily. And then you go, well, why did it take so long? Because you've been fighting this internal battle for so long about it. But the timing sometimes just has to be right. It's when the mood strikes, like I can have 10 baskets of laundry. No, I need to fold the laundry. I know on the other side of that obstacle is a bunch of folded laundry, but
Mhm.
getting there is really
yeah,
hard. And all of a sudden one day I'm like, I'm just going to fold 10 baskets of laundry today.
Mhm. Yeah,
yeah,
with like no real problem, but it was a problem every day before.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
That is
Well, I
amazing.
wish you'd have made it sooner, Storm. And Jess and I got some really good stuff. But
Good.
what I'd like to suggest is that we get together again sometime with the three of us and have more conversation because I think it would be great.
Yeah, I'd
Oh, would
really,
love to.
yeah,
Yeah,
likewise. Yes.
absolutely.
I have had such a good time talking with you guys today. And Jess, thank you for being so candid and open with me. I really appreciate it. And I wish Storm you'd have been here longer. So I'm assuming that we're going to get you back on here real soon and we're going to do a full couples interview. And in the meantime, if our butterflies on the wall liked our content, liked what they were listening to, what should they do?
Like and subscribe.
Yes, like and subscribe.
Thank you. And we'll see you next time.